My name is Tim Layton. I was a first officer on the Saab 340 for American Eagle. The morning of 9/11, I remember I was on my sixth duty day, and I had done an overnight in Rochester, New York, and I was on a flight back to JFK from Rochester. That's what was scheduled, and then I was just supposed to do a Boston turn out of JFK, and then I was off for a few days. And, again, everything was normal, and we had gotten our clearance from ground control to taxi out to the runway for departure. Just continued on with our checklist and did the taxi checks and got everything ready. And we got, we were holding short of the runway there ready for departure. And so we left, the ground frequency and went to tower and told them we were ready to go. And there was a little bit of hesitation from the controller, and a few seconds later, the controller came on and told us that, to hold short. So we didn't think too much about it at first. We just sat there, I guess it was a minute or two. It seemed like forever, but we hadn't heard anything. So the captain checked back in with the tower, and he said, yeah, you're going to be ground stopped. And finally, after another couple of minutes, the captain got back on the radio and just asked the tower if they could kind of give us an update, just so we could let the passengers, know what was going on. And then that's when the news kind of started to filter in. And at first, it was a report that there had been an airplane crash in the New York City area. Then we had heard that an American plane was involved, and then we're thinking, well, God, was it a mid-air collision? And some of the debris hit a building? Or, again, we're just kind of trying to piece together possible scenarios in our mind. So we called our dispatcher, and we wound up taxiing back to the ramp. We got all the passengers off, and then we went inside the crew lounge, and then that's when we realized for the first time, because we turned the TV on and began to watch, what had actually happened. And, obviously it was just, it was just surreal. It was hard to imagine that something like that had actually happened. And then we saw the footage of, I think, the second plane, actually crashing into the tower. And then, of course, at that point, I thought, man, I better turn my phone on and call my wife. So, and I got a hold of her, and, of course, she was really, she had panicked, and, because all they heard was that she knew I was flying back into the city that morning and had heard that an American plane had crashed into, one of the buildings in Manhattan. I actually remember being one of the first flights that got released to fly back to JFK, and there had been another Saab that had landed at Rochester. We got released to fly the same plane that we'd come up there in back to JFK. We went out there and the batteries were dead on it. I had to call crew scheduling, get another release, and we actually took the other plane that had come in. And had it not been for that maintenance delay and having to get a new release in a different aircraft, we would have actually flown back to JFK completely empty. But in the meantime, as we were switching aircraft, we actually had one passenger show up, and so that was a little bit weird. And of course, we were all a little bit paranoid at that time, with everything going on. So
sure.
I just remember as a crew, the captain talking with us, and we just, we're definitely, it was a different brief from any time before in terms of safety, and that the passenger needed to, we'd watch him the whole time. He'd have to stay seated, and, we really weren't profiling at that point, but obviously everybody was just scared because of what had happened, So it was, so we got released and got back to JFK, but I'll never forget that flight, that morning on the way back. And of course the Saab, it's, you really had good vision from the cockpit, and we didn't fly at super high altitude, so you could it's almost like flying a GA aircraft, and earlier in my flying career, you can really see a lot, and you're not that far off the ground. And the approach that we would fly coming back into JFK, we would do an arrival and come in over Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I'll never forget, a couple of things. number one, just the eerie silence on, I mean, if there was ever a case of the silence was deafening, that was it. I mean, as we came in over Bridgeport, I just remember looking over and just seeing the two plumes of smoke coming out of the ground from where the towers, once stood, and it was hard to just take it all in and just still really fully understand, what had happened and why it had happened, and it was just something, unfortunately, I'll never forget. The first night when I did my overnight, I overnighted in the same crew at the Boston airport. I'm sorry, in the same hotel at the Boston airport as the crews that perished on the flights, those originating flights from Boston. And so I really didn't even think about it, honestly. And I got there, we got checked into the hotel, and I guess it never really dawned on me, that hey, this is the same hotel where these crews stayed, before the flights left that day. And I went down into, they had a little kind of a hospitality room set up for the airline crews, and I went down there, and of course that's when it hit me, because I walked into this room and there were candles burning, there were flowers and poems, that people had written, just all kinds of little memorials that people had set up in there, and there was actually pictures of some of the people, and I just remember, standing in there and looking at the pictures, reading the things that people had written. Yeah, it was so unbelievable to just think that, 3 or 4 days ago, these people were literally standing in the same place I was, doing the same thing I was doing, and and they're gone. They're dead. They were killed in a horrible, tragic accident, and and that's it. I was given notice of being furloughed probably, I think, within 2 weeks of September 11th, 2 to 3 weeks. It definitely was not something that I expected, and I didn't even initially think it would affect my job. Of course, I just was thinking about the tragedy itself and all the lives that were lost, and how that just horribly affected so many people. Didn't really know what to think at that point. I guess I thought, or I hoped, when I turned in my my jet manuals and my charts and everything to the chief pilot's office, that it wouldn't be for long, and then I'd get to come back. But you don't really know at that point. You don't know, is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be 6 months? And I was married. I had a little child at home, and so I quickly just had to turn to to working anywhere I could just to make ends meet, while I was on furlough and wasn't being paid. I hated being furloughed, but I also realized that there was just so many people that day that were affected so much more tragically than just, I had lost my job at that point, but I was still alive, so exactly. In the grand scheme of things, that's really the way that I looked at it. Well, Shannon, I think the biggest thing for me is, there are a lot of heroes that emerged from this horrible tragedy, and unfortunately, most of those heroes, lost their lives, and there's so many people. Obviously the people in aviation, all the rescue workers, people that had horrible, tragic deaths and that were in the World Trade Centers and around the World Trade Centers, and as well as Washington and Pennsylvania. And it's I think the main thing for me is just for people to never forget that. Just like we have Memorial Day, and we remember all of our veterans and the war heroes and the people that gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country. I really look at this in the same way, and I think one of the most disheartening things for me, as an American and just as a person, somebody that cares about other people, and you want to see the best in people. Unfortunately, in the recent days, following that tragedy, I saw the worst in a lot of people. I saw people in the airport, in JFK in New York and in Logan in Boston that were actually upset and, complaining because they were being searched. And because, their personal belongings were being looked at and just literally almost like throwing fits. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I remember seeing that in both of those airports and just thinking, how these people just got killed. I mean, thousands of people just tragically lost their lives. And it's because these people were able to enter through security and this wasn't caught, and now you're actually going to complain. Yeah, you think it's an inconvenience or a violation of your rights to be searched for a few minutes and be questioned. So I think, that I know it was a culture change. It was something different for the American people, but I really think that's it for me is just don't forget. There's a lot of things that changed for a lot of people with that. So I don't think we ever need to take that for granted, and I think people need to be respectful of that and never forget these people that lost their lives and again, don't forget the heroes that did everything they could to try to prevent those tragedies from happening that day that were aboard those planes.